Are you a real estate investor looking to sharpen your skills or a newbie looking to become one? You're in the right place. Welcome to Where Should I Invest? Real Estate Investing in Canada with your host, Sarah Larbi.
Welcome back. I'm Sarah Larbi. You are listening to Where Should I Invest? I'm excited to have Scott Zandbergen on today's show, who is another person that was able to use the BRRRR strategy, buy, renovate, rent, refinance, repeat, to also leave his corporate job. So we talk about that, and when he did it, it was actually at the start of March, about a week before all the shutdowns happened. So we talk about that, as well as a lot of interesting things in how he was able to leave his full-time job and how he's been able to do that using the best strategy, in my opinion. Again, there's pros and cons to every strategy, but this is definitely my favorite, using the BRRRR strategy. And speaking of BRRRR, if you are interested in learning in-depth information, my 1-year, 12-month ongoing course starts January 2nd or 1st Tuesday of every single month, and the 3rd Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern time. There are 2 live calls, guys. If you haven't joined, there are a few spots left. So don't forget to check that out, sarahlarbi.com, and then just click on the BRRRR Freedom Community. So I hope you guys enjoy this podcast, and see you next week. Scott, welcome to the show for time number 2. How are you?
I am excellent. How are you, Sarah? Thanks for having me back.
Good. Yeah, I'm super excited. I'm super excited to hear what you've been up to recently as well. But for those that may not have heard you on my first time around, just a quick overview, you know, what your strategy is, your portfolio, roughly how you got into real estate. Let's go through that kind of stuff if you don't mind.
Sure. Yeah. So I am a, real estate investor, like we all are on the show, I guess. I started in about 2014 is when I bought my first property. I primarily focus on the BRRRR method, like a lot of people do now, duplex conversions. So I've done a lot lately in the Welland market, also the Hamilton market. So I just love buying, older bungalows, throwing a nice 3-bedroom suite in the basement, maximizing the rents that you can get out of that one property. And it's been awesome. And my strategy's evolved since then a little bit. So I've picked up a couple of flips here and there as well. I'm all in this world of investing now. So.
Very cool. Awesome. Yeah. You've got lots of experience, and the best strategy, in my opinion, is the BRRRR strategy, which you are doing. And so before we started recording, we were talking about how we both left our 9-to-5 jobs. So first and foremost, congratulations to you as well, because you pulled the trigger this year in 2020, retirement 2020, right? Retirement
2020, and congratulations to you. So this is both very fresh for both of us.
Absolutely. So how long did it roughly take you to say bye to the job world?
Well, let's see. So I left in March of 2020, but like I said, I started investing in real estate in the early part of 2014. And so from that point, I think for me, it became apparent in the first couple of years of investing that this can be done, right? So like the vision became clear to me after getting a little bit of momentum. You do a couple of refis, you see the cash payments that come in, you see the cash flow coming from rent, and then you start to kind of build your spreadsheet and realize this can be done. Like I can build a plan here to replace my income. So for me, I guess that was like 6 years. I probably could have done it faster if I was really, really focused on it, because the truth is I really only doubled down on it in about 2017, 2018, and then 2019 is kind of where I really got focused and built a plan out and made a decision that I was going to exit the corporate world at some point, and then pulled the trigger in March of 2020. So
that's awesome. All right. So we'll come back to March 2020 because there's lots of interesting things around there. But one of the things that you said that resonates with me too is that you started slower, and then you started seeing, potentially a couple years later, oh wow, like this can work. Because I'll tell you, when you first start, you're like, I'm only getting this cash flow. How am I going to do it?
Yeah.
I'm only doing this one property. How is this going to work? How do you go to the next one? But I'll tell you, at some point it starts to snowball, right? It's kind of like, it starts really slow. You start getting the hang of it. And then you're like, oh, I can refi these, the market, the timing in the market.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden you're like, oh wow, like I bought in a good area, I bought under market value, this appreciated, you got a couple of tenants that turn over and you can reset market rents. And at some point it snowballs to be able to do it. So essentially, from what I'm hearing, is really in the last 3 years is when your lift happened.
Yeah. And for me, it was like, how a lot of people start their first property or two. You start with single family homes because they're the easiest, and it's very turnkey. It's a little more of a buy and hold strategy. So you're not really putting in the renovations. So I started there, and I started with 3 properties that I bought all in 2014. And they really went up in value nicely. I mean, to your point, they didn't cash flow worth garbage, right? They barely covered themselves. So I just held on to them and didn't really do well from a cash flow perspective. But when the time came up to renew the mortgages, which was just a year ago now, I looked at all 3 of those properties and saw how much the value had gone up in them, and made a decision to sell all of them. So I sold those and then redeployed the capital into duplexes. But that was like one of those great big ahas, like, wow, that's like, you wait, five years goes by, and then bang, the value had gone way up. Now, obviously we were in a really, really strong market of appreciation. These were in properties in a town east of Toronto, in Bowmanville. The markets had gone, just boomed massively. And so just really kind of worked in my favor. So sold those, redeployed cash into more duplexes, and that's what I'm holding now.
Awesome. That's great. And, what's your take on tenants? Like when you're doing a duplex conversion, I guess for the basement, for Ontario specifically, every market's different, right? There's no like rent control or price increase control per se in the basement portion. But, like, are you looking for tenants that turn over in a certain timeline, or are you looking for those ones that are wanting to be there for a long time? Because a lot of investors, depending on where they are, they might want one versus the other. Personally, for me, I like 2 to 5 years, get out,
Totally. Yeah. And that has been a change in my thinking as well. So absolutely, the first 3 that I bought, the single family homes, my mindset then was, I want to find people that they're going to make it their forever home. I would never think like that anymore.
Me
right
neither.
now when I'm filling a main floor or a basement in one of my duplexes, the tenant profile I'm attracting tends to be young couples, young families, working professionals. Most of these guys have aspirations to eventually buy their own home. And that works out great for me, right? So they're going to be in the house for a couple of years, maybe 3 years at most, is from what I'm seeing. Then they will turn over, and I'll have an opportunity to get into that unit, maybe refresh it a little bit, maybe do a little bit of work here and there, and go find a new tenant. And hopefully the market rents have gone up a little bit, and then I can increase my cash flow that much more.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you mind sharing like something recent that you bought, like purchase price, reno cost, what you're estimating, or if you have the ARV, and then just like the rents on each of the stories?
Sure. Yeah. So, I can just speak generally about the properties I bought in Welland. So over the course of about 12 months, we bought 5 in Welland, and all of them they're like cookie cutter, right? So they're 1955 or 1960, all brick bungalow, about 1,000 to 1,100 square feet on the main floor. Okay. So the purchase price for those homes, the lowest I paid for one was $320. The most I paid was $370. Now it's hard to find those for $370. Now they're all kind of $4 $4.25. And these are grandma's house when you buy them, right? They need a lot of work upstairs. A lot of times they'll shag carpet. The kitchen is from the 60s. And so the renovation budget on something like that can quite easily get to about $100,000 to $125,000, depending on how much work goes in upstairs, plus the suite in the basement. So our strategy has been the same across all these properties. So we modernize the main floor without going overboard. So we in some of them, we've put in some new flooring. If the old floors were super squeaky, new floors. Kitchens, we've done a bit of a mix. Sometimes we rip kitchens out, put a new kitchen in. Other times we've just painted the cabinets and maybe refreshed a couple of appliances. And then we turn our attention to the basement. Basement's always 3 bedrooms, brand new suite. So we got the basement to the studs, and then build from the ground up a brand new suite, 3 bedrooms, 1 bath, common space. And the rents that we're getting on every single one in Welland is the same. So I always charge $1,695 for the top floor, and I charge $1,495 for the basement. So call it $1,700 and $1,500. and that is plus all utilities. So I don't pay any of the utilities. They pay their own hydro, they pay their own gas, they pay their own water. So that provides pretty decent cash flow on a property that's, you know, let's see, my holding costs on that is going to be somewhere around $2,000, let's say, right, with the mortgage and the property tax and the insurance.
Okay, cash flow, once you factor in all the stuff roughly per property is what?
So, like, it depends how you look at cash flow, right?
Yeah.
Like, if you want to be very conservative and you want to put in your maintenance contingency and your vacants contingency, I think it's going to be roughly in the $800 per property mark. But when you self-manage, you tend to look at least the way I do it, right? I have a bank account for every property, and I just see the funds coming in, and I always just want to I want to buffer in that account of at least $5,000, hopefully $10,000 in the account. And then everything over and above that is that's just gravy to me at that point, right? And then, so some of the properties I have are the ones I bought at a little bit of a lower value. You know, to me, they cash flow in the $1,200 per month range. You know, and then there's some other costs because yes, I've dipped into home equity lines of credit to do some renovations. So I have to service that debt. But one thing I always like to remind people is you got to remember that the money that you borrow for these projects, if you're on your home equity line of credit, that's all a tax write-off. So make sure you're working with a good accountant to help reduce your income as well. And that helps with the tax bill at the end of the year. So
yeah, absolutely. So just to go back, so thanks for sharing that insight, because then it helps a lot of people thinking, okay, well, what am I looking at? So renos you said were roughly what, 120 on average?
Yeah, I would say the lowest I paid for renos on a house in one of those was about 100, and that's HST included. The most I paid was probably about 125, maybe pushing 130. And that was one of the ones that required a little bit more work upstairs and required, you know, maybe $3,000 to $5,000 to expand the driveway, for example, because maybe the parking wasn't wide enough. So, so some of those things will start to add up a little bit, and that's inclusive of, you know, you're getting your BCIN designer to do the floor plans, the permit costs, those kinds of things.
Right. And then what do you get as a refinance amount usually on those as an average?
Well, it is starting to do better. So now we're starting to see refis close to the 500,000 mark on those. So then you're able to pull out a little bit of the capital. So I wouldn't say these fall into the category of being a perfect BRRRR where you're getting 100% of your renos.
Is there really that any perfect BRRRRs left though? I mean, like you might do a perfect BRRRR 1 of every 10, but at the end of the day, like just in my opinion anyways, and I don't know how you run the numbers, as long as you pay back all of your holding costs, all of your reno costs, and like even just like half of your down payment, I'm happy because I can pull the rest out.
Totally happy with that too. Yeah. So, I mean, I'm quite happy to leave some equity locked up in there for a period of time, because the thing we have to remember too is the refi doesn't only have to happen once, you know, at the end of the renovation. You can refi again a year later or 2 years later, right? I just went through this on one of my Hamilton properties that I have. It's also a duplex, and I just went through a second refi on it. The first time the appraisal came in at 510. 2 years later, the appraisal came in at 630, right? So the BRRRR can be a multi-year strategy as well, right? You get to get your paydays a couple of times throughout the course that you hold, or through the duration that you hold that property.
Yeah, exactly. And then the other thing I would just go back to that you mentioned is your helocs. Like if you're servicing the debt, I mean, at some point you can refinance and do a cash out refinance if it makes sense and you're still cash flowing. I mean, obviously you never want to be too leveraged, but then you can take that and you can pay off your HELOC so that you're not servicing that debt anymore at that point in time. It opens up that amount again, and then you can reuse that for the next property afterwards.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's a good point too, is I've done it both ways, right? When I've refied, sometimes I've done a cash out to pay back another HELOC that I had to help me kind of propel forward. Other times when I didn't need the capital right away, I'm just quite happy to get a new HELOC set up on that property, knowing that it's there, the money is there if I need it for another property, but I'm not making payments against it until I start to use it. So yeah, exactly.
That's awesome. And then do you have any special like tenant screening measures, processes? Do you do that? Do you hire somebody to do that? How do you find your tenants right now?
I do it all myself. I tend to find, I would say the majority of my tenants I'm finding on Facebook now. That's really changed actually in the last few years. It used to be I would find them all on Kijiji. And now Kijiji seems to have just dried right up for me in that market, at least, where the leads don't come in like they used to. I don't know why that is, or it's just maybe Facebook Marketplace has become more popular for people to be hunting for property or for apartment rentals. So I'm finding the majority on Facebook. I've been using Zumper a little bit too, hit and miss there. Get a lot of leads through Zumper, but very little follow-up from the people that reach out. My strategy is I get somebody to reach out through Facebook Marketplace. I engage them in a conversation very quickly just to kind of see, who they are, what's their story, why are they looking, why are they moving, and I start to put in some pre-screening questions right away just through that conversation, like what do you do for income, how many people, any pets, and all those questions. And then if I like what I'm hearing, then I generally will send them to a Google form and they fill out some more questions for me. And that's where I'll get things like what is their income? What's the credit look like? And so that's just part of my funnel of getting them through that screening process. And then once they kind of pass that gate, then I might get them on a phone call, ask them a couple more questions. And at the end of that, then I start to look at, all right, who am I going to invite to a showing? And by the time I have the showing, they're pretty highly qualified at that point already. So I might only show the apartment to, 3 to 5 people tops.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of people that you screen out.
Oh yeah. I don't want to. I've done it the other way too, right? Where I'll do like the open house style, and I show up and say, hey, I'll be at the property between 3 and 4 or 3 and 5 on a Saturday, and then it's just like the quality of candidates that come through are just not there.
No.
And so many no shows, and it's just like, I got better things to be doing than this. So.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it is important. So it sounds like your process is thorough as well. And so is mine. And this is like, if you're living in a province where the rules and regulations are pro-tenant and it's going to be really hard to get the wrong ones out and it's going to take a long time, this is going to be the part for people to really pay attention to and be thorough. And everybody's going to have a different, like little, nuances and different things that they do that they don't do, but just make sure that your process is as thorough as possible. So that you can weed people through, because I'll tell you, there's just a lot of people that will start applying, but they are definitely the wrong tenants. And I want to go back. You mentioned something interesting when you're asking them about Facebook. What do you do for income? Not do you have a job? Because you got to be careful with discrimination.
Right. Yeah.
And like what you can ask and what you cannot ask and what you can say no to and what you can, what you you can't. So I think that's just an important thing, because you can't really say no. You can't really say no to somebody if they don't have employment income, but maybe they're on disability or whatnot. Like you got to be careful with how you word things.
And it's a blend. So I'm always asking them about what's their household income and what is the source of the income, and I let them tell me, right? So they get some child benefits. Maybe one of the household is getting some Ontario works. Maybe the other one works full time. It's the whole picture, though, right? Yeah. And so and I look at, if the cost of the rent is $1,700, generally my rule of thumb is I'm looking for the income to be 3 times that. Right? Me too. And I will say this is important because a lot of people don't understand they can't afford it, right? So maybe the rent is like $2,000 and then they're making like $3,000 gross. They're not going to be able to afford that rent for very long. But a lot of people aren't very good with their finances, so they have no idea what they can afford or not. So it's important that we tell them. It never ceases to amaze me, that exact point about how many people will apply and they'll say, I earn $2,500 a month. And the rent on the place they're applying for is $1,700 plus utilities. So then I say to them, well, you need to budget probably about $1,950 with your utility costs, and you're making $2,500. So sometimes I will just engage them in a quick conversation, like, do you have a car payment? Yep. Okay. Do you eat? How are you doing the math here? So anyways, I don't want to. Sometimes I find like I'm giving financial advice to tenants that are applying, and I tend to engage them a little bit in conversation, because, at the end of the day, you're going to get to know these tenants, right? When you place them in your unit, you're going to get to know them. You're going to hear from them once in a while. So I want to know that it is somebody that I can have a conversation with, that there's mutual respect. They don't talk down to me or talk trash. There's just red flags that come up sometimes just based on the way they communicate too, right? Yeah, absolutely. So, the only thing I will go back and say though, even though I have a 3-to-1 and Scott has a 3-to-1, your tenant, you don't want to tell your tenant that is your hard rule and disqualify them on that, because essentially you can get yourself in trouble. Yeah. So everybody's got their internal processes and their internal criteria.
but I would just say, like, don't share that with them. If they're not the right person for whatever reason, just don't give them a reason so that you don't get yourself in trouble, because essentially you can't have a fast rule that says they have to have 3 times the income. You can suggest it, but don't give them that reason as why you are saying no to them, because you can get yourself in trouble.
Yeah. And every once in a while, you will get somebody that comes back to you and says, you know, why wasn't I chosen? Right.
Right.
And the standard answer just has to be something vague along the lines of, oh, we decided to go with another candidate or another applicant. And if they say why, it's like, we chose somebody else. And sometimes I will say something like, hey, I work with a business partner and we make these decisions together, you know, whether or not that's true on that property, whatever. It just helps kind of shoulder the burden a little bit of having to deliver that news. And most people aren't, won't pry too much, because what you'll find is that they've probably been turned down before as well. Right. And so they're getting frustrated, but it just happens.
Yeah, I love, so what I usually do is I'm like, hey, you know, thank you so much for applying. We just had so many applications, and usually it's true. We had so much applications. I only have this one property and I have to pick somebody. So unfortunately, I just went ahead and picked somebody else. However, if you want, I'll keep your information on file. If something else comes up, I'll give you a call. We can connect then. So I find that if you leave it somewhat open, they'll be like, you know, on their better behavior, essentially. And they'll be like, okay, well, you know, there might be a chance for them to call me back for something different. So I found that line just works awesome. And they don't really ask why. It was like, one property, I've got like a dozen people. Like, it's just, you know, that's the numbers.
Yep, that works. Yep.
Awesome. So what's next for you?
Well, I mean, for me, it's like, you know, now that I've, well, as of recording this, I'm about 6 months into my self-employment journey. So being in the full-time investing world. So for me, it's figuring out, I'll be honest, I'm still figuring it out. Like, what is my strategy going to be going forward? Because now that I don't have the 9-to-5 job, I don't have a T4 income, it's a little harder to go out and get a new mortgage. You'll learn this as well.
I know.
So like, that's why I started getting into doing a couple of flips, because I can still acquire properties. I can use private money to buy, and I don't have to worry about holding it because I'm going to sell it at the end of the project. So, you know, have a couple of those that are in process. But then the other thing is that, so there's one property that a duplex that we're working on right now. It's in Hamilton. And like, this one I'm super excited about. It's a big property, 2 big units. And the further we go down the path of renovating it, the more I'm hungry to want to keep it, right? And I bought it with private lender money. And so now I'm hunting harder, figuring out there's got to be a way that I can get this thing financed, because I want to keep it in my portfolio, because I know it's going to be a good, like, strong asset that's going to cash flow. It's going to appreciate. It's a great area on the West Hamilton Mountain. So I can't bear to sell it if I don't have to. So I've been like chasing down different brokers, going directly to different banks, credit unions, you know, just trying to build those relationships. And I'm starting conversations now with some B lenders, and I recently put together like the whole document package, and here's the story. And it's what I've actually been pleasantly surprised, excuse me, that I'm not being shot down right away now. And because like, I was always thinking that it's got to be an A lender or nothing for a refi, but that doesn't have to be the case, right?
No.
So a B lender is looking at my portfolio and looking at net worth and looking at rental income and saying, hey, you know, I think we have something to work with here. Now, we're probably not going to get like the 2% A lender rate, but we might be in the 4% range, which to me sounds pretty good. I mean, I'm quite happy to get that. So I'm chasing those angles down, because I want to figure out, how do I keep going and acquiring property? And I don't necessarily want to only do it through joint ventures. I have done a couple of joint ventures, but I don't want that to be my only way. I would rather do more and own more of the outcome. So
there's something to be said about that, right? Because I know it's like, there's good and there's bad, but the fact that you can own something and have full control over 30 years or more, if you want, over a property, there's something to be said about that. Because, you know, like, yes, you could go the easy route, bring in somebody for 20% to be a mortgage holder, as an example, or something along those lines, right? But there's, you know, it's good that you're thinking outside the box and you're reaching out, because it's not just A lenders. You fit in this little box with A lenders, but I'll tell you, the credit unions, I mean, I'm glad you mentioned that. There's lots of options, you know, hopefully, that you can pull from there. And then between 2 and 4%, like, it's still cheap money.
Oh yeah, it is. And it will still cash flow pretty well. right? And you have to remember that if you get a credit union or a B lender or whatever on a property, I mean, maybe 5 years later, after having it cash flow okay, 5 years later, maybe there's an opportunity to refinance it again with an A lender at lower rates. But who knows what the rates will be like at that point in time. But it's not like that's the end game, right? There's always going to be opportunities down the road. Or maybe at some point I do sell the property, right? Maybe it's gone up so much in value that I want to take the equity out, right? Mm-hmm. So there's just, that's what's so awesome about real estate investing, is that there's just options on the table at all times. You have control over your outcome. You can be active in the game, right? It doesn't feel like a game of chance, which is what
you know, in time too, like little mistakes are forgivable. You just keep hanging on to the property. But I will say too, like Scott, I mean, you're flipping a couple, but I'm sure you've got some backup strategies in case that you can't sell. Cause I think that's the important part, right? Is every single strategy, you want to have a backup plan to your original. Yeah.
And of course, when you flip it, the buy matters more than anything when you're flipping, right? Like you'll hear people say you should be buying at 60% of ARV. So that you're protected enough in case the market doesn't go where you need it to go. But there also has to be that backup plan that if the market's not ready for me to sell when the property's done, maybe I will have to rent it. Maybe I'll need to carry it for another year or two. And those are all options that you have to be okay with, right? Multiple exit strategies really, really matters. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So the last question before our lightning round, but I wanted to talk to you about this. So you left your job. I left my job recently. We kind of both left mid-COVID, but you left right at the beginning when this whole thing started back in March. So how did that all play itself out for you?
It scared the crap out of me. First of all, I'll be honest. I mean, I was confident that I was going to, pull the trigger and go all in on real estate, but I had no idea the world was melting down. So I literally gave my notice the week of the world starting to shut down. So just before that happened, I remember the next day, so I gave my notice at my company. The next day it was, I hear on the news, oh my goodness, the NBA season's been shut or canceled the rest of the season, and NHL. And I'm like, this sounds like a pretty big deal. What have I done? The world is ending. And I just walked away from a good corporate job. I'm an idiot. So this is of course what's going through your head, right? All that negative talk that sometimes we face. But here's where things got a little bit crazy. So, and then of course, then we're right in the thick of COVID, and the politicians are out every day talking to us and sharing, and there's a lot of fear out there. And I was worried about my tenants being able to pay rent, and all those things were going through my head. But then the worst part of it is that 3 weeks after I left my job, I'm starting to be, okay, this is fine. We're going to figure this out. I left because I had, cash flow coming in. I could do it. But 3 weeks into me leaving, my wife gets a phone call one morning, and they tell her that, oh, we're being affected by COVID, and we're gonna have to let some people go. So, so you have to realize that part of my comfort in leaving my job was that my wife was still working.
Right.
She lost her job, and she got the phone call April 1st. And no, it was not an April Fool's Day joke. And they basically said 2 weeks notice, April 15th, you're done. And so then we're both looking at ourselves going, okay, now things just got really serious here. Right? So
and plus you have 3 kids, I believe, right?
Two kids.
2 kids, okay.
Yeah, two daughters, one of which is in first year university. so that's expensive.
Yeah.
And the second's going into grade 12. And so anyway, she lost her job. But you know what? We did not panic. We kind of took a look at our portfolio, and we looked at, and I've been doing this all along anyways, right? I had the spreadsheets going. I knew how much income was coming in from jobs versus real estate. And then what I did is I used the opportunity to double down on some private lending that I had started about a year earlier. So I had some private lending going on, which generates some decent cash flow. So I did a bit more of that. So I doubled down on some lending to kind of generate more instant cash flow. And here we are. It's been 6 months now. Neither one of us are working. My wife and I are both very active in the real estate business, and we're doing just fine, right? And we bought 3 properties since COVID started, and we're moving forward. I put in probably 5 offers in the last 2 weeks. Mind you, it's impossible to buy stuff now because everything's going multiple offers, but we're still trying, right?
That's a really cool story. I mean, and how you came out of it, how you didn't panic, because as everything was shutting down, that's when it was the scariest for people, right? And throughout the summer, I mean, there becomes kind of better normal than it was back, but you really left in the midst of like when there was, I think in my opinion, most of the panic of what was happening, because there was a lot of unknowns.
Uncertainty everywhere. And there was all sorts of, people were putting on webinars. Here's how to talk to your tenants. And so I did what a lot of people did. I reached out proactively to my tenants. I sent out emails and I said, hey, if you're affected by this, please come to me. We'll talk about payment plans. And nobody was affected, right? I mean, CERB certainly helped those that were impacted from their jobs, but like I didn't fall behind on rent with anybody. All of them are now back to work again. So it was a bit of a blip in terms of a panicky moment there, but in hindsight, we're doing fine now. Now we'll see, because now we're kind of in the so-called second wave. And so who knows where this is all going to go, but I'm feeling a lot better about it now, at least, right? Like I feel like we weathered that storm, and it helped me become more confident and know that I can figure this out, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it sounds like you're a good landlord too. You've reached out to your tenants. You've offered them some solutions if they get stuck. And I think that's the important thing to do, right? You want to get a good pulse on what was happening. Because in the beginning too, I was like, so we're probably going to have to carry everything at some point. But, and going back, and for me, luckily, like everyone was good. Everyone was paid, like paying. Some people were on CERB, but they respect me enough to be able to know that like I have bills to pay and this and that, right? So like we are good. Like if they need repairs, we're out there, like, well, not me, but a handyman or somebody is out there, and we do treat them well. Like they are paying customers, in my opinion. And I think that's a big piece, because then you hear around all of these tenants that took advantage of it.
Oh yeah.
It didn't sound like you had any as well, but the other thing I want to go back to that you mentioned is you have a buffer for every account, for every property. And I think that's going to be important, right? Because if something does happen, who knows what will happen, but have a good buffer. You said 5 to 10 grand per property. Everyone's going to have a little bit of a different how much, but like, let's just say you had to carry something for 3, 4, 5 months. Are you going to be able to do that, or are you going to lose the properties? Right. And I think that's a good way to plan for the downturn. If there is a downturn, and there might not be a whole lot of a downturn, and there might be, right? But just have a good buffer so that you can carry the properties if needed. And it's going to give you peace of mind, and you're going to be able to sleep a lot better at night, I think.
Yeah, you nailed it. So you gotta have some reserve, some cash available to you to weather those storms, whether that is access to your HELOC, or whether that is, you're sitting on a bit of cash per account. Like you just need those options available to you, right? You can't be running so lean that, somebody doesn't pay rent 1 month that you're bankrupted. Like that's a bad idea.
Yeah, absolutely. Anyway, Scott, I mean, we can keep talking forever and ever about like so many different things, but I'll have to have you back for a third time at some point. The next part of this podcast is the lightning round. So you probably have heard these questions. I don't know if you have the same answers.
I forget now. Well, we'll see.
We'll see, I guess. So are you ready to play the lightning round?
Let's do it.
All right. First answer that comes to mind. Number 1, what is your favorite real estate investing book ever?
Favorite ever? I've read lots of them. The one that I'm going to call out this time. Okay, Rich Dad Poor Dad's my favorite ever. The second most favorite that I read most recently is, it's probably on my shelf here. It's the RSP Secret, which is around how to get people to invest their RSP dollars into, as a second mortgage or first mortgage, right? So if you start to unlock how to help people passively invest using their RSP funds, that can open a lot of opportunity. So I just did one actually recently with a former coworker of mine who reached out, wanted to do some investing. We talked about what options they had, what cash they had. They had RSPs, and so we put a mortgage together. So it's pretty cool.
Amazing. I'm looking at your background, and I have a few of your books too. I can't read all of them from there, but I'm like, I think we have similar libraries.
This is the classic from Stefan Arnio, right? Money People Deal.
Yeah.
That's a great one too. But
I see the Tony Robbins as well in the back. I have that one too.
Yeah.
All right. We'll talk about our books a different day. Number 2, what is your favorite podcast?
Come on. How am I supposed to answer that? This is a great one, Sarah.
No. So other than mine, because the listeners want to know, like they're already tuning into mine, but what else is there that you like to listen to?
I listen to lots of them. I like from a Canadian content perspective, I really like Andrew Hines' the Andrew Hines Real Estate Investing Podcast. I like how he goes deep into numbers with people. So I get a lot of value out of listening to his. But my podcast list is pretty full. I got tons on the go, some US ones as well. So
very cool. All right. Next question, number 3, what is your favorite pastime aside from real estate?
Hanging out with family. I love driving. I've taken my car to the track a few times. That's fun.
What do you drive?
Right now, it's a BMW M2.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Very nice. Very nice. I just bought a Tesla Model Y.
Oh my
God. To be delivered.
Nice. Well, that'll maybe be my next one is something electric. We'll see.
I will tell you that tax depreciation on its own was worth it for me to get it this year.
Oh, yeah.
Talk to your accountants. I'm not one of them, but talk to your accountant because that was a big decision for me to do.
Nice.
Based on that. Number 4, if you lost all your money and your assets tomorrow, how would you start again?
Like, because I've already been through it and I know what to do. So I would just, I would probably start working with, find a partner. You're saying if I lost all my assets? Oh, that's like, I don't want to think about it that way, Sarah. That's rough. I would probably find a money partner, right? And, and be the working partner, put the sweat equity in, do a deal or two. And I would certainly follow the formula that I'm used to, which is buy a bungalow, suite it, get the cash flow going, and then hopefully, a money partner that's willing to do a handful of deals together.
Amazing. JV with a BRRRR with a JV partner.
Yeah. If I had no assets, yes. I guess that's what I'd have to do.
All right. Last question, number 5. If somebody has $50,000, they want to get started, how would you recommend they spend that money?
Well, actually, it could be similar answer to that. I mean, put it with somebody that's actually doing work. Get your money working. If you are bold, you could go do it yourself, right? I mean, with 50 grand, you could go buy a property. I mean, you're not going to buy in necessarily Hamilton, but you could go to a fringe market and get started. You could buy a property. You could start with a buy and hold. I'm just a big advocate of the thinking you just got to start. I know a lot of people might say, let's go do a lot of education with that money. Don't invest all of it into, attending some seminars and things like that. Think of your education as actually taking action and learning as you go with your money. So that's what I would say. I think it's just, you gotta be smart and don't waste time, because it's about time in the market, right? So get your foot in the market, buy a property, let some time go by, refinance it, do it again, and enjoy the benefits.
All right. Awesome. That's great. So Scott, where can the listeners reach out and find out more about you?
I'm pretty active on Facebook and Instagram. So, just look me up on either of those channels and feel free to connect and let's have a conversation.
What's your handle there?
It's my name. So Scott_Zandbergen on Instagram. I think it's Scott Zandbergen on Facebook. All
right. Awesome. And any final last words of advice?
Just go for it. Start. And also, if you do have a great corporate job and you don't have any intentions of leaving in the next 5 or 10 years, still start. Like, find somebody you can work with, invest passively. I just mentioned the RSP thing a minute ago. If you've got like a nice nest egg of RSPs, carve some of that out and go to get a second mortgage with your RSP and watch the returns you're going to get off of that, and compare it to the mutual funds that your employer is convincing you to buy. Just like, you got to start there. And I think that opens people's eyes a little bit to go, this real estate there's something there, right? And that'll often take you down a path of wanting to become more active. So.
Awesome. Great advice. Thank you, Scott, for being on the show. And it's always a pleasure to talk to you. You're just full of great insights and tips. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me on, Sarah.
Thanks so much for listening to Where Should I Invest with your host, Sarah Larbi. Make sure to listen in next time. We'll catch you on the next episode of Where Should I Invest?